So today's agenda is we'll be starting with RDD, that is the core data abstractions in Spark, right? So we'll be starting with the RDD part, and we'll do some hands-on, and post that I'll start giving assignments from today, right? So that's the whole agenda today. So last session you saw we executed on one word count example. So yeah, I saw like nobody last session. I think Manosis, you were sharing the screen. You didn't share the code, right?
Yeah.
So end of the session, you can share like whatever the text you are writing to explain. You can
Okay.
share it in the group so that everybody is having one copy with them.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. So fine. So what we can do? So today let's. You can basically download the code base, like it's openly available for everybody. One second, can you give me access, please? So basically, you can basically download the code here from my repository. You can just search Git. So there, basically, I have just uploaded the code. So one good thing is basically it doesn't matter you join a PySpark group or Spark with Scala. So you can access all this code here. Okay, so this RDD examples is the code base for RDD. Okay, so what we'll be starting today. So you can see like the code is available for both Scala and Python. Okay, you can see starting with RDD, that is nothing but it's a Python, it's a PySpark code, and the Scala variant is also available. Similarly, continuing with RDD and RDD part 2.scala. Okay, these are one and same only. And here like we'll be using PySpark. So people who are interested in Spark with Scala, I strongly recommend don't start with both the languages. You'll be getting confused. So let's go step by step. So you can just download this code, and here the data set is also there. So these are all real-time data only. I just extracted and I anonymized it. So we can use this data for all these analysis. Okay, so that is one thing. And yeah, with that, let's start with today's part. So I'll spend some half an hour to explain like what is RTD and all, and then we'll start doing the programming. Okay, so feel free to interrupt me, ask any questions. Okay, nothing to hesitate and all. So you have Sublime editor, anything? Which editor you use? Yeah, Kishore?
Currently, I don't. I generally use Notepad, but we can install that if you want. Quickly, we can install.
You can. For now, I'm just using this text edit. Okay, so first let's start with the RTD part. So I will discuss what is that. Okay, so we'll be starting with the RDD part. As we remember, like what we discussed in the day one, while discussing about the course contents and all, if you remember, uh, if you just remember what we discussed, like what are the contents of Spark framework we'll be discussing. So the first module is, if you remember, let me quickly go to that page. So how to go to the Spark documentation site? You can simply search Spark doc or Spark documentation. And let's go to the little old version, not the very latest, that is 3.0. So if you remember, these are the different modules, and we will be starting with the RTD accumulators and broadcast variables, then Spark data frame datasets and SQL, and then structured streaming. These are the three modules from Spark we will be discussing, right? So if you remember. So now the question is basically, we'll be starting. So when you, so as you know, means you have fair idea like what kind of projects we execute. These are mostly data related applications. Either you are creating a data mart, data warehouse, or those kind of projects, or you are streaming applications or ML models. So more or less all these different type of applications are heavily data driven, right? So you have basically huge amount of data and you are doing some operations on that data. Okay, so when somebody is talking about data, what thing comes to our mind? The first thing is basically we know data means database, right? So traditionally, or not traditionally, like generally enterprises store the data in a database or a structured storage. Okay, have you ever seen like any companies who is involved into different transactions, running a banking systems or running a e-commerce system, and they're storing the data in flat files? No, those days are basically 30, 50 years back, people were doing that. But now basically you can imagine like everything is basically database. So that means like every time we are doing any data operations like summarizing the data or adding some data, removing some data, these are all database. So everybody, it doesn't matter you are from software engineering background, retail background, SQL background, so we have seen databases, right? And to work with data, so we have till now we have a perspective like data is always two-dimensional, like a whole bunch of rows and columns, and then you read that data and then do some analysis on it, isn't it? So here also we are doing similar thing, but way more than that. One second, please. So here also we are doing more or less similar thing. So you are basically reading data from different systems. And again, for database also you have heard like two things, like online and means transactional processing, like the backend databases of e-commerce portal, banking systems, any companies what we are seeing or you have worked for. So and another thing is basically analytical processing. Okay, so for reporting, business analytics, this warehousing, that is another type of activities. Based on the data, there are two type of applications we have seen: OLTP, online transactional processing, basically working on RDMA softwares and all, how to create the database of different companies, different entity, and their relationship. ERP, we have familiar, we have heard or we are familiar with the current organizations or whichever client you are working with. And another is basically OLAP, like online analytical processing. That is basically you have your historical data and business want to do some analysis, some reporting like dashboard they want to create, so those kind of analysis. So and big data applications are more towards OLAP, okay, online analytical processes. We do a lot of data summarization, or we create different reports, all these kind of applications using data engineering skills or basically big data technologies, right? So here, like coming to Spark. So Spark has multiple ways to read the data and do the analysis. Okay, warehouses, like you are using SQL Server warehouse, you are using SQL servers or Azure warehouse, or you are using Google BigQuery, or you are using AWS Redshift, or you are using Synapse Analytics from Azure. So all these different systems, no, what you have used in the past or you are currently using, these are all used for a different analytical purpose. You are hosting a warehouse on that, and then different reports or Tableau dashboard, ClickView dashboards, and all. They're basically creating different plots and charts on those kind of data. And coming to Spark, so there are different ways to read data and do some processing. Okay, so all these traditional systems, whatever we have seen till now, these are all database type, like all are like relational databases. Okay, relational databases means tables. Okay, tables, you create an employee table, transaction table, customer table, like those, and then do analysis on that. But here in Spark, there are two different approaches, now very high level. One is a collection approach, another is basically a two-dimensional table approach. Okay, so it's very high level perspective on the on Spark side. So RDD, what we will be starting today is basically whole bunch of like these collections. Okay, you whatever the data set has been given to you, you have to read the data and you have to create a collection out of it. Okay, you have to read the entire data and you have to create a collection out of it, and then you apply your ETL on that. Okay, as you have discussed, like when you are creating ETL pipelines or data pipelines, so the data will not be used as it is. You have to apply a lot of data transformations. Okay, for example, we have given some examples like a traditional, basically a data mart project. Say business want to create some reports on their different data sets. So in RDBMS, there are different transaction table. We just discussed about the example of what you call, say, Reliance Jio. Reliance Jio is having a transaction table for prepaid users, one transaction table for postpaid users, another transaction table for Jio Fiber, right? For different what you call different database, transactional databases are there. For reporting, means we don't go ahead with this what you call normalized tables. Okay, generally RDBMS, they follow normalizations, right? Means data duplication shouldn't be there, their primary key foreign key relationship will be there. All these constraints, all this rule of thumbs we follow there. But in warehouses, it's mostly creating, in the warehouses, it's mostly on what do you call, basically facts and dimension tables. We'll come to that. So it's not like very normalized form. So maybe in the production databases, you have multiple transaction table, and in the warehouses, you have to club them together as a single table. Okay, that's what I'm saying, like data transformation. Okay, you have Reliance Jio prepaid database is there, so maybe you have 20 columns there, and you have Reliance Jio postpaid, there are some 25 columns are there. Say Reliance Fiber, there are 30 columns are there. How to take all these three data sets together and create a single transaction fact table? That's the whole idea basically. So our basically ask is here to how to create those kind of data sets, isn't it? How to create those kind of data, facts and dimension table. And for that, we basically we have to read all this data and we have to apply some transformations on that. These are called transformations. I'm saying I'm merging three transaction table as a single fact table. Or similarly, I have different customer table, one customer table for Jio prepaid, another for Jio postpaid, another for Jio fiber, and I have to club them together and you have to create a single dimension table. Okay, so transactional data are called fact tables, and their master tables like product table and customers table, offer table. These are called dimensions. Okay, so that's basically called transformations. You have to transform the source data or the raw data to basically analytics ready data. Okay, so for that we have different approaches to solve those problems. The first approach is basically RDD, accumulators and broadcast variables. So we will be reading the data always as whole bunch of collections, and then we will be applying some operations. Collection is something not new, it's everywhere. Even if a person is not having any programming software engineering background, still you have seen, you have, in the college at least you have learned C++ or C, and you have seen array data structure there. Array is basically a series of elements stored at different indices. It's exactly similar concept. RDD is basically similar thing, like you are creating a distributed list. Okay, traditional list, whatever you have used in the college time or you are currently software engineering field. So collections means like either it's a list or a set or a map. There are different collections are there. And I'm just asking list here. So you just read the, I'm just trying to relate this RTD, resilient distributed data set, with list. Okay, list is a series of elements stored with different indices, and I'm just trying to basically compare these two things. You have to read the data as a collection, and collection has different properties. You can access the elements randomly. You can basically iterate them, and while iterating also you can apply some transformations on that data, right? You can do a lot of operations on the given data set, isn't it? Okay, one second. Just one second, I'm getting a call. Read the data as different collections and then start applying transformations on that. So how to transform it? As you know, collections are iterable. You can keep iterating the elements or records one by one, and you can apply the transformations. For example, the same, what you call the last session you saw word count example. You read the data and then keep on splitting each of these records through a delimiter, then basically append one with each of these words, and then apply aggregations with each of these words, and then find out the sum of ones. And similarly, another example I can tell you, suppose somebody has given you a transaction data set, and the transaction data set is basically having transaction ID, customer ID, transaction amount, transaction type, product ID, counter products, all these informations are there. And you have to find out, and basically you have to find out the total sum of transactions at a daily level. Okay, or total sum of transactions at a customer ID level. So same thing, you just read the data, say it's a comma delimited transaction file. You create a collection out of it, then keep on iterating through each and every record of that collection. Then say split it using comma. Then you are converting each of this record into a list of fields. Then you again apply transformations to find out only the transaction date and the transaction amount. So now your collection is a collection of key value pairs, where key is basically the transaction date and the value is the transaction amount. Then again keep on iterating the records and basically aggregate them basis the date and find out the sum of transactions. Okay, that's basically the final output. That's basically the way we apply the transformations, or basically that's what I mean as transformations. Okay, data transformations and all. Okay, so that is there. So now let's basically go through let's basically understand what is RDD. Okay, we just discussed in a very high level. It's nothing but a collection only, but it's not just a normal collection. It's not a standalone collection. It's called a distributed collection. Okay, so any queries till now, like what we discussed, this analogy, what is transformations, and how to what is collections? Anybody having any queries on this? Just everybody try to participate. Just don't let me just speak. If I just speak, like I can finish the entire course in 10 sessions. So let's make it interactive. Anybody having any queries on this? Vinay, Manosis? Can't hear you anything. Okay, any query, Manosis? Brian?
No, I'm okay.
Suresh, we are good? Pratyusha?
Could you please explain what is fact versus dimension table?
Yeah, so these are warehousing concepts. We'll discuss in great details, but for now you can just imagine. So in traditional databases, we called each of these entities as tables. Okay, so basically I'm capturing all this transaction information. That is called, we are saying it's a transaction table. We are capturing all this customer information. We are saying customer table or customer entity, right? Or customer relations. That's what we call in traditional database in traditional database area. But when you're talking about warehouses or data marts or data lakes, again, like I think I've given some idea like in the first session, I think last session. So basically you pull all this data from different systems or different business verticals and make it available in a central location, in the raw data as it is. So that's called the data lake. And then basically you segregate the data, you apply some data cleansing, some basic data transformations, and create different and segregate the data as different warehouses. Okay, you got all this data from Reliance Petrochemicals, and you created a whole bunch of 5 tables, 10 tables for reporting. That is called warehouse. Okay, so basically the objective is basically the backend. You are creating backend data for different reports or different analytics, right? So that is called warehouses. And further, if you just further basically granularity is basically data mart. Okay, say for Reliance Entertainment, you want to basically work on the marketing part. Okay, so marketing, you want to basically take some data driven decisions for the marketing team. So for that you want to create a separate whole bunch of tables, and that will be used for the machine learning or the analytics or the BI part of the marketing part of Reliance Entertainment. So you are creating further a subset of the warehouse that is called data lake. And in this warehouse data marts, we basically don't call the data sets as entities or relations or tables. Rather, we call it as facts or dimensions. As the name suggests, fact means factual informations. So all this data which keeps on generated very frequently at a second level or millisecond level, like transactions or user activity data. So these are called factual informations, and the table which is, or the data set which represents this transactional data or basically rewards means loyalty points related data or user activity data. These are called fact tables. Okay, and similarly dimensions are basically the master data. Okay, customers are doing transactions. Transactions are nothing but products are being sold. So products, rewards, like you have different offers. Like if you take any example, say Amazon.com. So they sell different products from different sellers, and they run different offers. Okay, so for this week they're running say an offer like buy iPhone 11 and you'll be getting 10% off. if you're using say this XYZ credit card. So these kind of, there are different offer informations, and which doesn't create very often. Okay, so suppose daily a billion transaction happening or a million transaction happening in Amazon.com. It doesn't mean like on new 1 million customers are getting added. The customers are there, so few, maybe some 100 customers are getting added at a daily level. Okay, so once all these customers added, so this kind of data which doesn't get generated very frequently, these are called dimensions. Okay, or the master data of the facts. That's basically the analogy, and we'll discuss more in details. There are different types of dimensions out there. What are the different considerations we consider? What are the different points we consider while designing a fact table? What is star schema, snowflake schema? We'll discuss that in more details. But for now, this is a very high level overview what we just shared with you. Okay,
Okay,
and
thank you.
also everybody just starts spending time on warehousing concepts. Okay, what is slowly changing dimension, type 1, type 2, type 3, what is fact, what is dimensions, okay, what is snowflake schema, what is star schema. Just try to create your base on this, okay, because data engineering is all about that related stuffs. How efficient data mart you are creating, and how easy it is for the data analytics team or the machine learning team to consume your data. Okay, that's basically the success factor of any ETL project or data pipeline project. Okay, so let's, without further delay, let's start with the RTD part. Okay, so we'll spend some time understanding the RTD part. So RTD, what we have discussed till now, it's basically, we are saying it's basically a collections only. Okay, you read the transaction data as a collection, and then you keep on applying transformations. The same example what we discussed. You read a transaction data set. I'm giving you example. Say you read a transaction table, transaction.csv, and this is having fields, say transaction ID, customer ID, amount, product, okay, like, and product count. These are the different fields are there, and the transaction ID is T01, customer ID is C01, okay, and then say amount is 100, and say product is say P1, okay, count is say 2. Like that, you have multiple records are there. Okay, so transaction 2, transaction 3, transaction 4, and say this is customer 2, customer 1, customer 2, like that. And say you have this products like P1, P2, P3, P2, like that. Okay, this is the transaction data set. And just somebody just asked you, can you tell me, the question is basically, can you just find out the total transaction each customer. Okay, so that's basically the question is basically, we initially will be trying this kind of basic analysis. So we'll be reading a whole bunch of data set, and we'll be start applying this kind of transformations to find out the answer. So here we have two customer IDs, C01 and C02. So the answer should be C01 total is basically 200, and C02, the total amount should be again 200. Okay, so this is basically what I mean as transformations. You read the entire data, this transaction.csv, as a collection, as a big list. Okay, here it's only 4 record. In real time, you will be seeing 4 billion records or 40 billion records, like that. Okay, so that is basically the what you call the data set is. You read the data as a list, and then keep on iterating, and then start applying the transformations of that. Okay, that's basically the whole idea here. So that's basically the whole idea is basically here. So you have to read the data and keep on applying the transformations. Okay, so now let's discuss like what is RDD now. So RDD is basically, we are saying resilient distributed data set. Let's understand each of these words line by line. So first we are saying data set. Okay, so data set means what? Data set, like, as you have seen, any kind of data. It can be so in a very high level. If you just talk about data set, so 3 things come to my mind here in big data idea. It can be structured, it can be semi-structured, it can be unstructured. Okay, like that. Okay, structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. So structured data is basically what is the data which is structured. So have you seen any structured data? All these relational tables, whatever we have seen, no, these are all structured data, isn't it? So all these relational data, like Oracle database, MySQL database, any database, whatever you have seen, the tables are structured. Why structured? Because each and every record is associated with a schema. Okay, every record or every data point has an inherent structure associated with that. So that's why it's called structured data. And semi-structured data, anybody aware of semi-structured data? Sandeep, Suresh, anybody? Have you ever interacted or have you ever like come across with any semi-structured data? Exactly. So XML and JSON. Okay, XML and JSON kind of like these are the semi-structured data. Okay, so basically for structured data, what you are saying, relations or tables, delimited files, and yeah, these are the kind of what you call, these are basically the structured data. And semi-structured data, we are saying JSON, XML don't complicate the thing, so we never use JSON. We never use XML, so JSON, and any NoSQL databases if you have seen. Okay, NoSQL databases like NoSQL database like MongoDB, Cassandra. So basically the records in these kind of databases or these NoSQL databases are also semi-structured in nature. And any unstructured data anybody seen? Yarika, have you ever used any unstructured data? Yeah, audio, video kind of. Okay, and audio, video, and like in there,
Like image file.
yeah, image,
Does image file come
yeah.
under?
But these are all theoretical. In projects, you hardly get a chance to work on this kind of data. Mostly for us, it will be kind of Twitter feeds. If you are working on any what you call sentiment analytics problem, or like Amazon product reviews, or any Wikipedia articles. So these are kind of like unstructured data. So last session, what you saw, we just executed a word count example. That is whole bunch. That's an example of unstructured data. Unstructured data means the records are not having any proper structure associated with that, isn't it? So the data, like each and every data point doesn't have a fixed structure. Okay, every record varies with each other. Okay, that's basically one thing we saw, and post that. Okay, that is one thing, and along with that, okay, so these are different type of data set what we discussed. Okay, then the next thing is coming as distributed. Okay, so basically I'm just going top down. So first we discussed about what are the data types, data you will be seeing here, and then what is distributed, what we are saying. Distributed means it's a normal English only. Distributed means it's distributed across multiple steps. Again, here what is that? Like here you are doing some analytics on, say, Amazon's transaction data. Okay, so Amazon.com, it's kind of like more than a 10 years old company now. So they want to do some analytics, and they are setting up a new team for a separate type of analytics, and you have to basically first capture all this transaction data from their different databases and different data warehouses and all, and you have to create a central repository of the data, and then you start doing your analytics. Okay, so here the data volume, you can imagine, like in India itself, like at a daily level, there are millions of transactions that are happening. Okay, so similarly in US and other countries, you can see similar volume, like where the number of transactions is like millions at a daily level. And what will happen, like when you are working in like last 5 years, 10 years of data, the data volume will be in petabyte scale data. Okay, hundreds of petabytes of data. Okay, when we are working on those kind of data, you cannot store it in a single computer. So as we have discussed last session on distributed computation and storage, In the distributed storage part, we discussed like when you set up a cluster or a network of hundreds of thousands of clusters, so you basically get a huge storage unit or a huge computation unit on top of which you are doing all your data processing. So here basically we are saying resilient distributed data set, which is a nothing but a collection. This collection is distributed. So in any programming language, when you are basically, suppose in Scala you are mentioning say val l or val list is equal to a list of say 1, 2, 3, 4, like that you are creating. Or in basically what you call in Python, what you are saying list is equal to, in square bracket you are mentioning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that you are creating a list of you're creating a list of numbers. Okay, that's basically what you are doing. So in Java you are mentioning say array list x is equal to new array list, and you just keep on appending elements there. So these collections, when your program is executing, suppose it's a Scala or Java program, these are running on top of JVM only, Java Virtual Machine. Or if you're executing a Python program, so your Python program is getting executed on top of your on top of your Python kernel, right? So all these collections, whatever, when you are creating, these collections are basically in memory. Okay, in memory means every other programming language, they always compute the stuffs in the memory, in the RAM. Okay, so when you are saying, when you are creating a list like Scala list or Python list, these are called standalone collections, because this Java or Python or Scala program, these are running on top of Java Virtual Machine, and Java Virtual Machine is something like you have installed on your local computer or on a server, and that server is executing your code, and in that code, in one of this sentence and one of the statement, you have written this thing like say list is equal to list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so when you are doing this, you can just imagine what you are doing when you are doing this. So when we are basically creating a collection, that collection is always residing in the memory, in the heap, or in the main memory, or in the RAM. Okay, but when you're talking about big data, like data is basically humongous, like it's terabyte scale data, petabyte scale data. So you will never find a machine or single machine where it is where you can load that into the memory. And when you are using this distributed computation framework like Hadoop, Spark, Flink, and all, these are all like they also follow the same approach. If you want to read a data and apply some transformations, it will also do the same thing. It will read the data in the memory, in the RAM, and then it will keep applying the transformations or whatever operations you want to do. Okay, so that's why here we are calling it a distributed list, because your list is not limited to a single computer's RAM. Rather, it is residing in the RAM of hundreds of thousands of computers in the cluster. Okay, that's called distributed collection. Okay, distributed computation. I'm not sure like if you're from BTech, but at least from my side, like I was having distributed computation as one of the paper in my I'm from basically masters. So there was a paper like in BTech, I think it's not there, but yeah, if you just explore, just try to broaden your knowledge on this, what is distributed computation, storage, and all. So distributed operating system was something I think pretty much everybody should be aware, like Sun Solaris and all. But yeah, similarly, like we are here discussing about distributed computation framework called Spark. And Spark basically, when you are creating a collection here using Spark, so the collection is basically an in-memory collection. Okay, the entire collection is residing in memory. Okay? The entire collection is in memory. Okay, so obviously like it cannot be fitted to a single computer. So each of these computers in the network, in the cluster, they hold like a portion of the data in the RAM. Okay, that's why this collection is called in-memory collection. Okay, that's why this collection is called in-memory collection. Every time you create a collection, that collection will be basically stored in the RAM of hundreds of thousands of computers in the cluster. That's why we are calling this collection as a distributed collection. Okay, that's why this collection is called as a distributed collection. Okay, that is there. So the second term what we discussed is basically distributed. Okay, we discussed data set. So RDD is basically resilient distributed data set, and data set is basically any structured, semi-structured, or unstructured data you are reading and creating a RDD out of it. And once you create a RDD, that RDD is distributed because it is residing in the RAM of hundreds of computers in the cluster. And then the last and the first term is basically is called resilient. So what is resilient? Resilient, as the name, it's also English word. Like resilient means it's fault tolerant. Okay, once you read a data and create a RTD out of it, that is fault tolerant. Okay, that will fault tolerant means like suppose you have written 20 lines of Spark code. In the first line you are reading out data and creating a RTD out of it, and in the last line you are basically, and in between, like in the remaining 18 19 lines of code, you are doing some transformations on that. But at the last line you are just storing the same data like what you have created in the first line, that you are storing it back to another location, another HDFS file system or S3, Amazon S3. So there you are trying to write the data. So when you are doing that, the data will remain, the data will be stored as it is. Suppose in that line one, the RTD or the collection, whatever you have created, that is having a billion record. So in the 20th line, when you are storing the data, or like in between, like on 14th line or 15th line, if you're applying some transformations on the data, you will always see the same picture or same snapshot of the data. Okay, it's not like you read the data and in between something happened wrong, few nodes went down, or a few nodes just restarted, so you lost track of a few portions of the data. Like in the first line you created a billion record list, and in the 5th line also you applied a transformation on that billion record list. But in the 10th line, what happened, like because of this problem in the cluster, so your data reduced to 500 million only. So whatever the transformations you have applied, so it's got applied to only that 500 million record. So that never ever happens. Okay, so Spark is all about RTD. And in fact, if you have just done some research, you might have seen like Spark is, as such, there is no such research paper. Like Spark is a framework developed by Matty Jaria as part of his MIT PhD project. So then the white paper was RDD, Resilient Distributed Dataset. He just worked on this research paper called RDD, and then it is then they gave the name as the framework, because RDD is just not the single data abstraction. It's a combination of RDD, data frames, Spark SQL. So they gave it a name called Spark, and then it is then licensed, in the Apache licensed, right? So basically the whole invention is basically around this resilient distributed data set. How to create a list, or how to create a distributed list that will be seamless, that will be fault tolerant. Okay, you're working on a cluster of 1000 node clusters, anything can go wrong. Okay, because you can just imagine, like suppose in your home also, if you're staying in a bigger house, like having, say, you just made a broadband connection and you have like say 4 or 5 Wi-Fi routers you have installed. So anytime any router may malfunction. Okay, suppose you have a 2-story building, in the downstairs you have 2 routers, in the upstairs, like you have another 2 routers, and you are basically connected to one router in the Wi-Fi network, but it went down. So immediately you will see like it got disconnected. It happens, right? Or even in your home also, suppose you have like 3 to 4 laptops you're using, you're staying with the family. So one of the laptop may go down also. So it's a little bit old laptop, so it hard disk got crashed, or basically your monitor just got disconnected, or basically malfunctioned, or your system got rebooted because one of these system was a Windows system, and they just automatically applied some patch and it restarted. Anything wrong can happen, right, when you're working on a network of computers. So similarly, so same thing, what we are saying, like once you read on data as a RTD or a distributed list, the data will remain as it is throughout the execution, unless you manually filter out some records and all. Otherwise, the data will remain as it is throughout the execution. That's why it's called resilient, or it's fault tolerant. Doesn't matter whatever bad will happen in the cluster, still throughout the program you will be working on the same snapshot of that particular data set what you have read in the first line. Okay, so it never corrupts the data. Even something goes wrong, it will seamlessly handle that, and you will get the same data as it is. But it shouldn't be like you have 100 node cluster and you completely shut down the cluster. Obviously, your program's execution will fail. But I'm saying, like this fault tolerance or this resilience is in the perspective of, like in an ideal scenario, when your cluster is having multiple nodes. So failure of multiple nodes is obvious, is inevitable. Any of this node may go down, but the data is stored in such a way, and so you will be always getting the same snapshot of the data without fail. Because distributed data set, what we have discussed, like you connected thousands of nodes together and you just achieved a huge computation unit. Okay, and we call it as SDFS or Hadoop Distributed File Systems and all, right? So now the question is basically, so distributed file system is not just limited to that. Rather, there are a lot of things are there. Distributed file system is whenever you're storing your data, the data is broken into multiple 128 MB blocks. Okay, it doesn't matter it's a 10 TB data or 100 TB data. So whatever the data you are ingesting to your big data cluster or the SDFS Hadoop Distributed File System or any of this distributed file system you are using, so the data automatically get broken into the default partition size of 128 MB and then 128 MB, and then what is happening, this suppose you will end up like thousands or millions of 128 MB blocks scattered across multiple computers in the cluster. Along with that, each of these partition also get copied thrice. Okay, each of these partitions, each of this block also get copied thrice. That's the default number of replications. You can change both the parameters. Okay, default block size 128 MB, you can increase it to 500 MB also, and default what you call the replication factor is 3. You can change it to 2 or you can change it to 4 also. Okay, all these flexibilities are there. So when you are discussing about a file system which has this kind of nature, every time you throw some data into it, it will be broken into multiple 128 MB blocks or chunks, and on top of it, it will be copied three times. Okay, the same chunk is available 3 times, and these are not co-located in a single system. Rather, they are scattered across multiple computers. Okay, so that's why what I'm saying, like every time a node is failing. Okay, so it never happens. It rarely happens because because most of the time you have a cluster and you have a DevOps team. They have written automation script. If there is any failure happen, it will be in the off time, okay, on non-production time. So you will never get that kind of scenario. Or if you're using cloud like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, so everything is basically managed there. Okay, everything is managed seamlessly or on the fly. So you don't have to worry about. So if a node is going down, within a fraction of a second, it will be replaced, and you will never notice like what went wrong and all. Okay, so resilient is basically we're saying fault tolerant. Once you created a collection which is residing in the RAM of multiple computers, and what happened, like suppose your Spark code is running for 5 hours or say 3 hours. So in those 3 hours, if any node is failing because of some or other issue, because of hardware malfunction or OS malfunction, anything, so still the data will be recovered from other copies from other machines, and you will still see the same snapshot of the data. Okay, you will never notice like few nodes went down and all these things. It is completely seamless. Okay, you will never notice it. That's why it's called fault tolerant. Okay, fault tolerant basically file system level. So Spark achieves fault tolerance at the file system level because the file system is robust enough. It has 3 replications. If few nodes are going down because of network failure or anything, so it will make sure how to read the same data from other computers, and it will give you a snapshot, exactly same snapshot of the data. Okay, that is one level at Spark achieves fault tolerance, and the second approach is at a job execution level. This is a very hi-fi concept, so we'll discuss that 2 to 3 times. But for now, I'm just giving a very high-level overview. So as you know, like in any other relational databases, also whenever you execute some query, it's a lot of things happen in the backend. Okay, your query will be parsed. It will create different query execution plans or called query trees, and then the underlying database engine will identify or estimate which path or which route of execution is the most robust one. It can be completed with minimum resource and minimum time. Then it executes it, isn't it? That's the whole story about the databases. So similarly here also, like in Spark also, when you execute a data pipeline, so you have already seen the word count example last time. It's a very tiny data pipeline. And also we discussed about this transaction data, find out the total transaction volume from each of these customers. These are also kind of sample data pipelines. Okay, these are small data pipelines where when we are executing this. So so when you are working on these kind of systems, these kind of use cases, when you are working on these kind of use cases, what happens? So when you are working on these kind of use cases, basically it also has its own execution plan. Okay, so Spark job execution architecture is a very like important concept we'll be discussing a couple of times. For now, I'm just giving you a very high level overview. So whenever you submit a Spark application to a cluster, okay, you write a Spark code in a local computer using any of these IDs, say PyCharm or like anything, and you build the application and you want to execute it. So when you execute or you submit this application to a cluster, okay, a cluster of 100 node or 100 node or 20 node. So this, so and the underlying clustering software is called YARN, okay, YARN, YARN, yet another resource negotiator. We'll discuss that in more details. For now, just understand, just try to just relate it with the other systems. Like if you're executing Java programs, you are installing JDK and your code is being executed on top of JVM, Java Virtual Machine. Similarly, Python code is getting executed on top of Python kernel. Similarly, all Hadoop, Spark, and Flink programs, they execute on top of clusters. Okay, YARN cluster. Okay, they run on top of a single clustering software called YARN. Okay, so every time you submit an application to YARN cluster, a new application ID get registered to that cluster, and that application will be broken into multiple jobs. Okay, basis the number. So we'll see like there are different type of operations. Basis the type of operations, the number of jobs will get decided. Again, each job will be further broken into different stages. Okay, that is again basis the type of operations you are applying on the data set. Again, each stage will be further broken into different tasks. Okay, tasks are the smallest unit of execution. Just like you have seen, if you are from software engineering background, if you have used any Java program, Python program and all, so you must have noticed like the smallest unit of computation in Java, Scala, Python and all is called thread. Okay, thread is the smallest unit of execution. So here in the context of Spark, we are saying you can consider or you can relate task as a thread. Okay, the smallest unit of execution here in Spark is called task. Little above is called stages. Next high level abstraction is called job, and the highest level of abstraction is called application ID. Every time you submit a Spark application to a YARN cluster, a new application ID get registered. That application will be broken into multiple jobs, each job into stages, each stage into tasks. Tasks are the smallest unit of execution. And technically or programmatically, what you can say, partition or small chunk, when it is getting applied with one transformation, then this is called as a task. Okay, when you are executing some transformation on a single partition, then it is called task. That means you will end up with thousands or tens of thousands or lakhs of tasks while executing a Spark job. This is the volume of the data and the complexity of the pipeline. Okay, what is the relationship of this execution plan with resilience? So Spark also achieves resilience at the job execution level. Okay, so the output of each and every stage is physically retained to the temp directory of the YARN cluster. Okay, just remember, okay, just for now, just remember. Anyway, like we'll be seeing practically all these things. When you submit the application, you will see how the job stages get created. Okay, so we are seeing application ID. Every time you submit an application, we are saying a new application ID got registered, that get broken into multiple jobs. Then each broken into multiple stages is broken into multiple tasks. Okay, so Spark achieves fault tolerance in two different ways. One is basically at a file system level, and second at a job execution level. Okay, Spark achieves fault tolerance or resilience two different ways. At a file system level, what we discussed initially, every time a few nodes are going down, so seamlessly Spark will be able to read the other data from other replications. And the second one is basically at a job execution level. So when these hundreds of stages are getting executed, so the output of each stage physically written to the temp folder, and when the subsequent stage gets started, so it will read the data from the temp directory and process it. Assume like one job is broken into 4 stages or 10 stages. Suppose you completed the 8th stage and 9th stage got broken because of memory issue or some other issue. So it will not immediately terminate the application. Rather, it will read the previously checkpointed stage output. Okay, the previous stage output is sitting there in the temp directory. Then it will read from that, and then it will reinstate the process from that point. Okay, it doesn't start from the stage 0. Okay, that's what I'm calling it as resilience. Okay, so this is the two different ways Spark achieves resilience. These are very, very important fundamental concepts. Okay, sometimes people ask in the interview like, what is RDD? What's the difference between RDD and data frame? Okay, how Spark achieves resilience? Okay, and this kind of approach on a very high level, how do you distinguish as a programmer? How you distinguish RDD and data frame? Those kind of questions comes. Okay, so we have to be thorough on this. Okay, with that, so we discussed what is, so then we just discussed about all these three keywords of RDD, and then the definition wise, we define it in this way. So what we are saying, what is RDD? It's a fault tolerant, immutable, partition, distributed collection of JVM objects. Okay, this is the definition of RDD. So it's a fault tolerant, immutable, partition, distributed collection of JVM objects. So most of the things we have discussed, collections we discussed, like it's generally a distributed collection, only what we have discussed initially. And JVM objects, why we are saying? Because we are saying Yarn is the clustering software we are using to execute the Spark applications or Hadoop or Flink applications. The backend execution environment is called Yarn. Yarn is not something like developed from the scratch. Rather, it has been developed using the JVMs. Okay, it used JVM concepts. Like when you are saying like your JVM is when basically you are saying like your cluster is executing your Spark job. That means in the backend, what it is doing, it is creating tens or hundreds or thousands of JVMs in the backend, and these JVMs are executing your code. Okay, this Yarn is basically is a software that has been used or that has been created how to basically create multiple JVMs and coordinate among themselves, and how to submit the jobs to those clusters, all these things. Okay, so what I'm saying, like Yarn is basically a clustering framework which has been developed to dynamically or on the fly create multiple JVMs and execute your job. Okay, when hundreds of JVMs are executing, it becomes very tedious to basically how to manage it or how to coordinate them or how to submit the jobs to those. Okay, this is not a smaller thing. So it's a huge software only. It's a lot of programming has must have been implemented, and that we're calling it as Yarn only. Okay, yet another resource negotiator. Okay, Yarn is running whole bunch of JVMs in the backend to execute your Spark job. Okay, that's why like all this data what you read, these are called JVM compliant objects, because you know in the backend JVMs are running your code. So all these things whatever you have written the code, these are all executed, or all this data set what you read from different systems, these are called what you call objects which are JVM compliant. Okay, that's why we're saying JVM objects, distributed collection of JVM objects. Fault tolerant we have discussed, partitioned we discussed. But distributed and partitions, these are two different concepts. Distributed is a very high level concept. What we are saying, the data is distributed across multiple computers. And partitioned is basically, so partition is basically a little different. So when you read a TB of data, so you may be having only 100 computers to process or 50 computers to process that. So 50 computers are processing a TB of data. So that means we are saying in a very high level, the data is distributed across all these 50 computers. And partitioned is basically, suppose my data is 1 TB of data, which is stored in Amazon S3 bucket or STFS file system. So it has been broken. It's available as 10,000 partitions. Okay, when you read that, when you store that data, it's a 10,000 partitions. Okay, 10,000 smaller blocks. Okay, or 10,000 smaller chunks, you can say. So that is a partitioning concept. Okay, your data is 10,000 partition, which is getting executed on top of 50 node cluster. Okay, so your cluster is 50 node distributed, and also your executions is happening on 50 node cluster. Okay, or your execution is distributed across 50 computers, but your data is partitioned as 10,000 partitions. Then it will see like it will take 50 partitions at a time and execute on this 50 node cluster, or basically in that fashion, like if you have 100 partitions, then it will be executed in 2 iterations on the cluster, because your cluster has a capacity to process 50 chunks at a time. Okay, if you have 1000 partitions, then it will be 20 iterations it will take to complete. You have 10,000 partitions, it will take 200 iterations to execute the job, isn't it? That's basically the whole idea of whole difference between partition and distributed. Okay, this is the definition. So first we discuss what is RDD, resilient distributed data set, what are each of these keywords, and we also discussed about the definition. And then the next thing is basically coming as how to create RDD. So I just want to take a pause. Like, anybody having any queries? Abhishek, you joined late. You have any queries?
Yeah, RDD stages storing into the temporary libraries.
Temporary directory.
Temporary directory. This particular part just elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah. So anybody having any queries? Or anybody understood can explain? Yeah, so there are 2 concepts here. You see, like, I'm not sure like how depth you are going, but it's a legitimate, it's a valid question only. It can be one of the interview question also. So we are saying the output of each of these stays physically written to the temp directory. Is it a temp directory that is the STFS file system, distributed file system, or it's just a YARN is having a temporary directory that it uses for temporary storage? Every other software uses a temporary directory. Even if you host Oracle database on your computer, it takes a temp directory in the, it will reserve some space in the C drive temp directory, because when you are executing some SQL queries and all, it may execute the query in multiple steps. It may create some intermediate data, store it in the temp directory, again create an intermediate data, store it in the temp directory, and then it will read the data from the temp directory and consolidate them. Okay, every other execution is multi-step process or a multi-hub process. You have to compute certain thing, persist it, again compute something, persist it, and then collate them. Okay, that's basically the purpose. So not just databases, every other programming language compiler you are installing, JVM or C++, they take a temporary directory in the OS folder and they try to make use of it, isn't it? Similar thing here, temp directory is a clusters directory. Okay, every time you host a YARN cluster on 100 machines, and each machine is having say 1 TB of hard disk, it doesn't format the entire hard disk, the entire 1 TB as your SDFS or distributed file system to store the data in this fashion. Rather, it uses roughly 70% of the hard disk for the SDFS. The remaining 25% remain as it is. Okay, because each of these machine is hosting some operating system first. Okay, a bare minimum machine cannot be used to host YARN, so the machine should be formatted with some operating system. All these production operating systems are all these production operating systems are CentOS. And if you are using this called if you are using Databricks and all, they use Ubuntu. And if you are seeing on-premise, if you are hosting some cluster, so that will be also on top of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Unix operating system. Okay, so when you are basically hosting a YARN cluster on top of 100 machine, and each machine is hosting Ubuntu OS, so I'm saying like roughly 70 to 75% of the space is used for the SDFS, and remaining 20 to 30% is used for the temporary directory, because your OS requires some hard disk. It's not just YARN install, there are some other software that are also available. They also require some disk. And on top of Spark executions also require some temp directory. Okay, so all this output of stages is not stored there in the SDFS, rather it is stored in the temp directory. Okay, so why it is like that? Why it's not storing in SDFS? What's wrong with that? What's the problem? Anybody getting a sense why it is not storing the output of the stages into SDFS? Brian, Vinay, anybody having any clue? Just a logical question only, it's not very technical. If you're following, you should answer.
Because it's not a actual output, it's not providing, it's just providing the data path.
Still,
Like which
even if
path?
it's not output, then what's the harm? Like, you can store it.
Like the path it is storing in a particular, suppose 100 systems are there, and YARN is in like I'm not getting the proper word, like 100 particular systems, and those all systems are connected together. So at a particular system, they have a certain path given, certain stages are given during the processing. So with the each processing, a particular instance is generated, that is particular, just like an address is getting stored. So is it right? I'm going in the right direction?
I would say in other way, rather you can just, the basic difference is, normal temp directory is basically the normal file system. We are using Windows, it's a NTFS file system where you store the data, only one copy of the data will be stored. No fault tolerance, nothing. But when you're talking about HDFS, you are adding extra burden, like every data move into your HDFS, it falls under all this criteria. It has to be 3 times replicated and all this, isn't it? So I know like my stage outputs are temporary. I complete 2 stages. The first stage output will be deleted. Okay, that should be a continuous garbage collection mechanism should be there. Because when you are running pipelines where processing TBs or petabyte scale data, so you will end up generating enormous amount of temp data. Okay, and there should be efficient garbage collection mechanism to clean it up. Okay, since I know like this data is temporary, it will be immediately after 1 or 2 stages, this data will be deleted. So why to put it in HDFS? Because HDFS will take 3 times more space, isn't it? Because it's three replications by default, isn't it? That's the main reason the stage output doesn't go to HDFS, rather it reside in the temp directory. Erika, you're following? Brian? Manosis?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, just I know it's morning time for most of the people. Just take a coffee and be attentive, because like this recording sessions and all, I don't believe on that. So if you're that much of dedicated, you don't require a training. You can self-learn, right? Because this training, if you go to any course there in Udemy or Google site, if it is a 4 hours, 5 hours course, sometimes people take it a month to complete that, isn't it? Because we are busy with office work and we have a lot of other work. So let's learn it in one shot. Like anyway, like I'll be sharing the recording every day, end of the day. But my point, what I want to make, so we have a general tendency like, yeah, I missed it, I'm just feeling sleepy, I just not be attentive, but later I'll just go through that video. But that later time never comes. We have n number of other things. We have family people, we have family, we have office work, we have other work. So we never time. So rather, like if you're sitting 2 hours, let sit it properly and finish it in one go. Okay, so that you don't have to again revisit the 2 hours of recording to practice the program or to understand one concept. But anyway, like you are open, you can do anything. I'm just sharing my perspective. Okay, so that's one thing we discussed. What is RTD and the different keywords there, and what is the meaning of data set, distributed, resilient, and partition. These things we discussed. And the next thing comes is basically how to create RTD. Just remember 3 things. Three things. If we discussed about RTD or data frame, so similar analogy we'll also discuss there. Now I'm saying, so the data what we are doing some processing or doing some analysis, there are 2 different approaches. RTD follows the collection approach and data frame follows the table approach. Okay, here you are reading your data, huge data set as a distributed collection and doing some operations on that, transformations on that. And there in the data frame, we will be discussing how to read the data as a huge in-memory table and then apply the transformations on that. Okay, so that's basically the objective. RTD is a distributed collection and data frame is a distributed table, in-memory table. Okay, and the same three questions: what is RTD, how to create RTD, how to apply transformations on that. Okay, we just discussed what is RTD, then we'll discuss how to create RTD and how to apply transformations. Okay, if you just see all these 3 things through the word count example, we implemented all these 3. But as I mentioned, like it will be top-down approach. You first executed a code, then I'm just discussing the theory part, then I'll be relating line by line or word by word in that program. Okay, that's the whole agenda. And similarly for data frame, we'll discuss the same thing. What is data frame, how to create data frame, how to apply transformation on that. Okay, so Spark is all about that only. Means how to create a distributed data set, then apply some transformations on that. Okay, so now coming to the how to create RDD. So here basically I am discussing a couple of things. So just remember how to create RDD. There are only two different ways to create RDD. Okay, so one is basically by reading data from external sources. Okay, and two is by applying transformations on existing RDD. Okay, there are only two different ways. Okay, every time a person like what are the different mechanisms or different ways to create RDD, or what are the different ways to create a data frame and all. The answer is two things. Okay, by reading data from external sources, you can read a Parquet file. So you can read a text file. You can read a sequence file. There are different file formats out there. We'll discuss. You can read different files and create RDDs out of it. And another thing is by applying transformations to existing RDD. I just missed one point here. If you just remember, immutable. We are saying RDDs are immutable in nature. Once you read a huge data set and create a distributed collection called RDD on top of it, then we are saying this RDD is immutable in nature. You can't. Immutable means it's an English word. You won't be able to modify its content. You created a RDD. That RDD is basically it's a constant value. You won't be able to modify it every time. That does that mean like all these things whatever we have used there in word count example and all these things in this transaction data analysis, these are wrong? No, rather what we are saying, what I mean as immutability is every time you apply or transformations on a RDD, you end up creating a new RDD altogether. Okay, every time you apply or transformations on a RDD, you always end up getting a new RDD. That's why it's called immutable. RDDs are immutable. You can't change it. Every change you are applying on a RDD, you end up creating a new RDD. Okay, and the previous RDD will be removed from the memory like that. That's basically the way Spark works. And here we are saying how to create RDD. We are saying another point is the second point is basically by applying transformations on existing RDD. Whenever you are applying a transformations on a RDD, you are creating a new RDD altogether. So both are basically complementary to each other. RDD is immutable, and creating RDD by applying transformations on a given RDD, both are complementary to each other, isn't it? That's the whole idea here. So that is basically the whole idea here. And what else? Okay, that is there. So now so we discussed about this thing. So now let's go to some hands-on part. So we have already opened the Databricks notebook. I am pretty sure like you have everybody just registered to Databricks, and now we are good to start using the Databricks notebook. So we have discussed like this is the clusters, this is the data section, and so in the data section, now before that, I think we first downloaded that, right? Can you quickly see like where that downloaded RDD examples went? Where is your downloads? Oh, you already extracted. Okay, so you can just take it out and just create a workspace folder. Create a workspace folder here and just paste it. Okay, so inside that you can see there is a data folder is there. Okay, that data folder is having all this data, and you have the code called starting with RDD and continuing with RDD. These are the two PySpark code that you have to upload it. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. So go to workspace. Okay, go to workspace. Just click this drop down, import, click browse, and then go to your documents, So just to organize all this code, let's follow this. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of time searching the right thing in your own computer itself. Okay, and another notebook. The first word count example, what we have discussed last session, that's only here. And a couple of examples, 20-30 examples are there. You can see one-liner code. Okay, we'll take baby step, like first learn very basic programming, and then we'll go to more important programs. The idea is to run one program at least today. Let's see. Okay, so okay, so you just imported both the notebook here. Just remember, every time you import the notebook, that is in the workspace. Data is for the data what you are processing. Okay, so what you can do, add data, browse in the data section in the RDD. Mostly we'll be using this create transaction, where it is. Yeah. This is the data set you will be reading, and yeah, the rest of the data we'll see, like when we will be using there itself, we will be uploading. Now let's go to some basic programs first. You can create a cluster here. It gives a free one node cluster. If you don't use it for 1 hour, it will automatically terminate it, which is fine. But our code will remain as it is, only the cluster will be terminated. And you can attach that cluster here. Okay, it will take a while and it will create the cluster. With the same word count example, what we have seen earlier, means last session, the same thing I have written. So we'll come to this program again, maybe in the 5th or 6th session. But before that, let's start with the basic examples, like what we have discussed in the definition. So let's see those things. So creating RTs, I'm just trying a couple of examples. So here you can see, yeah, now it's the right time to describe what we have done. So here you can see line number 1, what we have done. We are saying num underscore RTD is a variable is equal to spark context sc dot parallelize, and I'm passing a range of 1 to 11. Okay, range of 1 to 11 in Python, it basically creates a range of 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10. Okay, so I'm just creating a collection. I'm just creating a RTD out of this collection. Okay, I've created a collection of 10 elements, 10 integers, and then I'm converting that 10 element range to a RDD, to a distributed list. This is just a standalone list, and I'm just trying to convert it to a distributed list. So I'm using Spark context.parallelize. Okay, don't get like don't worry like what is this, where it is coming from. So all these APIs, we can go to the API docs and we can find it out. Okay, so here basically you can search so you can see there is a Spark context class is there. Okay, so Spark context class is there. So we are saying like every time you see like I'm starting writing the code, I'm using Spark context sc. Okay, this sc is nothing but a object of Spark context. Okay, this Spark context, whatever you are seeing here, no. So Spark context PySpark dot PySpark, sorry, PySpark dot Spark context. So this sc stands for Spark context. Then the natural questions comes to my mind, like who created this Spark context object? I didn't create that object. It's a normal object oriented programming. Or you can think like just like you are creating say n equal to 10. That means what? You are creating n as an object of type integer, isn't it? So similarly I'm saying like say d equal to false. That means I'm creating a boolean variable, boolean object, and having value say false. Similarly, sc is an object of Spark context object. Okay, so when you're using this Databricks notebook, no, so this notebook always comes pre-populated with this object. You don't have to create it. Okay, so in the real-time project, do you think like we use this notebooks and all? Mostly we use notebooks for interactive analysis, like some ad hoc analysis is being given to you and you are you are trying to solve those problems. Instead of creating an application in a local computer using PyCharm and all, you can make use of this also. Okay, you can make use of this notebook also, and you can quickly start writing the code. Okay, and nowadays, like, and you know, like Databricks is the company behind this Spark project only. These are the same people, same group of people who developed the Spark project, Matt Tijaria and his team. So the same group of people are running this Databricks company, and you know, this is one of the best, most popular Spark framework in the industries now. Okay, so if you yourself do the Spark setup and execute your code, and the second approach is basically you use this Databricks notebook to execute your code, it gives minimum 10 times better performance than your code. Okay, because they know in and out, they know all this optimization techniques, so they always write the best optimization. They have implemented all these optimization, and you can directly use this as a service. So you can say like this Databricks is basically a Spark as a service. Nowadays everything SaaS versions is coming, like Microsoft Office, they just released Office 365. Adobe is working on how to make their Photoshop as a SaaS. So different companies, even like nowadays you see like every other companies is focusing towards SaaS version. So similarly, Spark is one of the most popular distributed computation framework. So there are a couple of SaaS vendors are also there, just like Databricks. That's the most robust SaaS for Spark as a service. SaaS means software as a service. So I'm saying Spark as a service. One of the framework is called Databricks. Another is called AWS Glue. Okay, so AWS Glue is also a Spark as a service framework. Okay, so like that. So these are different SaaS are there. So basically, yeah, exactly. So what we are saying, we no need to import. Yeah, exactly. Spark context subject. If you're using Databricks notebook, you don't have to import it. Okay, it always every time you create a notebook, by default it is available for you. Okay, that's the thing. Okay, but in real-time project, if you are not using notebook, rather you are using PyCharm or any editor to basically write your code. So in that case, you have to create it manually. Okay, you don't have to. You means it will not be coming pre-populated. Rather, you have to what do you call? You have to create it manually. Okay, so we'll see that. But if I'll just quickly show you like what I mean that as. Suppose if you are going ahead with suppose I'm just going for this small project. Here you can see, say I'm going to RTD. I'm going to this example. So here you see I'm creating that object. Okay, I'm creating Spark session object here explicitly. Spark session.builder.master.appname.getterCreate. With this expression I have to write to create it. But when I'm using this kind of environments, this kind of like frameworks, then basically what happens? We can basically this comes pre-populated. Okay, Spark context object comes pre-populated. Okay, so basically what we are saying, SC is a variable, or basically it's an object of Spark context object. And what's its significance? It's basically what it is. It's basically a bridge between the programming environment and the execution environment. Okay, Spark context object is the entry point for the Spark application. Otherwise, you're just writing a Python code only. You can see it's a .py file. Okay, when you uploaded this file, you saw this is just a regular Python file, isn't it? So starting with rdt.py, it's just a Python file. So similarly, if you are using Scala or Java, you are creating a .java.scala file and you are writing the code. So means you are creating a Python file means you can write a standalone core Python program also. You can just write a dictionary or a list or an integer variable and do some processings there. But the moment you start using the Spark related libraries, then your Python application becomes a PySpark project. Okay, so the analogy is same, like means what you can say, like Spark is just a framework on top of Python. Okay, so suppose I'm saying like some people are from Java background here. So you write core Java program or you write Spring Boot. Okay, so you created a Java application using Eclipse or IntelliJ, and then you added the Spring Boot libraries in the Maven dependency or whichever dependency software you are using. The moment you add Spring libraries into your application, so your Java project is no more called as a Java project, rather it is called as Spring project. Or you use a framework called Hibernate, then you are saying then you are calling it a Spring with Hibernate project. Okay. Similarly, you are a Python developer. You are saying you are creating a Python applications to you are writing some code, and if you just start using a Python scikit-learn, that is a machine learning or data science related library, then you say it's a machine learning application. Or you start using the pandas, data frame, numpy, and all this, then you are saying it's a pandas data frame code. So basis the core language and what framework you are using, you are saying the application is that type of application. Without any exception, here also similar analogy. You are just creating a Python file and you start writing and start importing the Spark libraries and use the Spark libraries, then it called a Spark application or a PySpark application. Getting my point? So you use the core language. If you are using any high-end frameworks on top of it, then you are saying this application is that framework application. Whether the same Java analogy, it's a Java application or Spring application, or in Python, you are saying it's a normal Python application or a pandas data frame application. So here also similar thing, you are creating a Python file, but you are writing the Spark code. So you are saying it's a Spark code, okay, or it's a Spark job. Okay, makes sense? So basically the point what I want to make here is basically Spark is not a different language altogether. It's just a framework or just a library on top of Python. Okay, if you're using Spark with Scala, you can say you're creating a Scala application, but Spark is just a library on top of Scala. Okay, you are writing a Python PySpark code, you are creating a Python file, you can write the core Python code, but the moment you start using the Spark related APIs or Spark related libraries, then you call it as a Spark application, as simple as it is. Okay, so what you are saying, so you just use a Spark context object. Spark context is nothing but it's the main entry point to the Spark application. You created a Python file, you are free, you are open to write normal core Python program. You can just write a program to check what is the count of prime numbers between 1 to 1000. That's perfectly fine. You can write a linked list program, that is also perfectly fine. You can write a code to read some data from a database and do some processing, that is also fine. But the moment in the same Python code you started using the Spark libraries or Spark APIs, then it is called as a Spark application. Okay, and how to know like this application is a Spark application and all? So you start seeing like it has made use of Spark context or Spark session. So that's why that's the main entry point to the Spark functionality. So that's why we are saying it's a Spark application. Okay, Spark context at parallel, and you passed range 1 to 11. So what you created, you end up converting a standalone collection 1 to 11 to RDD, that is having elements 1 to 11. Okay, this num RDD is now a distributed collection of integers, but it's a very tiny distributed collection having only 10 elements. Okay, this is how we are starting. And in the next statement, we are saying num RDD dot get num partitions. So to check like how many partitions that data is having with. Okay, so in the line 1, I created a RDD, num RDD, that is RDD of integers. Okay, RDD of 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10, this 10 integers. And in the next line, I'm just wondering, I'm saying like RDD is a partition, it's a fault tolerant, immutable, partition distributed collection of JVM objects. So I'm just curious to see like how many partitions this data will be of. Okay, that's what I'm just trying here. Not very tough thing, just a matter of patience. Okay, if you just put some patience, then you can upskill yourself. Okay, many people they don't get a chance, they don't get time, they don't, because of bandwidth issue or because of some or other issues, they don't able to basically upskill themselves. They just remain same profile for quite a long time. But yeah, we should keep upskilling if you are looking for some better opportunities. So that's right, just we need to spend some time. Okay, otherwise everything is doable. It's not very complex mathematical equations we are solving, not physics and all. Just a programming what we have learned in the college time, just advanced version of the same program. And trust me, there is no algorithm level of things are there. In software engineering, if you're trying for Uber, Google, Amazon, those kind of companies, there will be a lot of there will be different rounds for what you call data structure and algorithm. Okay, people may ask graph algorithms, tree algorithms, and all this, like all different type of sortings. But here it is not required. Here's a data transformation. Even if you are expecting some what you call like data structure, not more than linked list. Okay, not more than linked list. I've never seen or have a huge alumni group. I've never seen anybody posted a question where an interviewer is asking, can you implement Tower of Hanoi or just implement traveling salesman problem in graph? So I've never seen those kind of questions. Okay, I'm more than like 420 people have cleared in, just joined this session, and I'm just maintaining all these people who are there in the group. I've never seen like anybody posted like this kind of questions. It's a very open forum. People generally openly ask questions. I also take feedback from there to add few things or remove few things from the examples. So here basically you saw, anyways, like here you saw line number 1, you created a distributed collection called num RTD having numbers 1 to 10, and in the next line you are saying num RTD.get num partitions, that's saying there are number of partitions as 8. So you can imagine, like if you don't specify any number of partitions, so the default partitioning is 8 here. Okay, the default partitioning is 8 here. So you read the data, and again default partitioning is just not 8 always, so it varies scenario to scenario. So here I'm saying every time it's a common interview question, like what are the default partitions in Spark. Okay, so actually most of the people give the answer like 200 because it's officially mentioned like default partitioning is 200, but it's subjective. If the default partitioning is 200, then why we are seeing 8 here? Okay, so basically there are different scenarios, different places this default partitioning work differently. When I'm converting a standalone Python collection to RDD, then the default default number of partitions will be 8. Okay, so get num partitions is a function in RDD. Same thing, you don't have to by heart anything. Just like you saw, Spark context is a class. So Spark context object dot parallelize we have used, right? I can search parallelize. You can see Spark context class is having a function called parallelize. Here we are passing two parameters, c comma num slices equal to none. Okay, distribute a local Python collection to form a RDD. Okay, using X range is recommended if the input represents a range of Pokemons. Okay, so here you can see sc.parallelize, and this person just passed a list list of 0, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, so 5 elements, and the second parameter is 5. So whenever you are seeing a parameter equal to some value, that's a default value. You can opt for passing that value, or you can opt out also. If you don't want, you can skip that also. But what's the objective? You can explicitly control the number of partitions. Here you saw we simply just called Spark context.parallelize and we passed a standalone collection. You end up getting a new RDD having 8 partitions. But if you specify num slices equal to 4, that RDD will be of 4 partitions. Okay, if you mention 10, that RDD will be created as 10 partitions. If you don't specify, it will be creating it as a 8 partitions. Why? Like where this 8 magic number is coming from? So Spark context is having a default parameter. So Spark context is a very high level object. Okay,
Siddharth, can you show us here like you get num partition how we could change it with the example you have shown, like num underscore RDD dot get number partition.
Sure. You
So
can see
here,
pass 5, right? You can
okay,
pass 5. You can see the number of partitions.
Okay, fine, got it.
Okay, like that. For now, I'm just trying to explain this. Like you can see, like by default, I don't pass anything. So you can see like 8 partitions. Okay, and why it is coming? Because Spark context object is a very high level object. It's a huge class, has been created with many number of functions. Many code has been implemented in the backend. So Spark context is having many default parameters. Okay, we'll see those parameters, like almost 20-30 parameters we'll be discussing. So the first parameter what we are seeing is called default parallelism. Spark context object is having a attribute called default parallelism, and it has been set with 8. That's why every time you convert a standalone Python collection to RTD, the number of partitions becomes 8. Okay, that's the whole idea. So every time you convert a plain Python collection to a RDD, it will be converted to RDD of 8 partition because the default partitioning is 8 here. Okay, that is there. And yeah, same concept, all languages, doesn't matter, Scala, Java, anything, whatever you use, everything, like every time you create a standalone collection to a RDD, it's a Python list to a RDD, or Scala list to a RDD, or Java list to a RDD. The default partitioning is 8. Okay, it doesn't vary language by language. Because if you just imagine, if you just see, means how I'll say. So just imagine like you are using WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp is what? It's a software that is used to exchange text messages, audio, video, images, and all, documents and all. It's a messaging applications what we are using. So WhatsApp is used for that, and you can access WhatsApp features or WhatsApp service using your Android phone, using your iOS phone, using your iPad. You can use your tablet. You can use your browser. Just like here you see, like we are using browser to access WhatsApp. The features and functionalities are same, isn't it? The core engine is same. Spark is the core engine. You can access or you can use Spark's APIs in Python manner, or in Scala way, or in Java way. You can use any of these programming languages, but the core engine is same. Okay, it doesn't vary language to language. Just you can imagine, just like WhatsApp is the engine, is the message exchange engine. You can access its services from Android app, iOS app, or browser. Okay, you are still accessing the same WhatsApp engine. Same thing here. Spark is the distributed computation framework that is basically executing all these stuffs. But you are basically accessing its. It's not WhatsApp like a fancy tool. It's a programming tool. So you can access this framework, or you can program it using any of these 3 languages: Python, Scala, Java, or R programming. These 4 languages. Okay, so the behavior is same, irrespective of the language what we are using. Okay, so that's basically the stuff. And then I just want to see, like, then we can see RDD. Okay, we can go here, Control F. You can search RDD also.
Siddharth, what is that glom function?
Yeah, we'll come to that. So just like you saw Spark context object, similarly RDD object also is there, class PySpark.RDD. Okay, so all this, so we saw like RDD.getNum partition, Control F. So you can see getNum partitions is a function, returns the number of partitions in RDD. Okay, so whatever theoretically we have seen, so everything we can see it programmatically. Okay, so that like you don't have to blindly follow one instructor. Yeah, if he's saying that we just have to remember, no, those days are gone. We are all experienced folks. We should start learning from the official documentation side. Because like, see, there are every class you will be seeing RDD is having roughly 100 functions. Data frame is roughly having 100 functions. You have different aggregation functions. There are roughly 500 functions out there. We'll not be able to discuss all this, but I'll be using like what we are using in the projects. Okay, in RDD there are 100 functions. Maybe we'll be using 10-15 functions here. In data frame we'll be using another 10-15 functions. In aggregations maybe we'll be using 20-30 functions. So the objective, I will always try to show you in the same API, so that you don't have to remember or by heart anything. You can come to the API. These are all API programming, application programming interface, API. These are all API programmings. The official API is available publicly. You can access it anytime while programming. You can, if you're using Notebook, you can open Notebook in one tab, another tab you can open this API page, and you can follow that. And you can see a lot of descriptions out there, isn't it? A lot of descriptions. Okay, they have put a lot of effort to create all these documentation sites, so the developer can come and they can easily understand out of it. Okay, so basically we saw like getNum partitions, a function that returns the number of partitions. Then you are seeing glom function, Control F. You can say glom is a function that returns an RDD created by coalescing all elements with each partition into a list. So we saw our RDD having 10 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10, but it is of 8 partitions. So what it is saying, if you're applying glom function, okay, if you're applying glom function on a RDD, it will just give you all this. If it will give you another RDD, that RDD contains all this smaller tiny list each list represents the elements of a given partition. Okay, we are saying we have 10 elements or we have a billion elements. Okay, these billion elements are divided into 8 partitions or 8 chunks. I just want to see like what is the content of each of these partitions. Do you see any practical uses of this? Anybody? There are many ETL people, developers are there. Do you see any practical uses like where you may think of the requirement to see the elements of each partition? Is it really required? Or without knowing the number of elements or the elements available inside different partitions, still I can write my data pipeline? Any practical uses anybody getting to know?
Yeah,
So,
if so, Siddharth, if you are dealing with very huge set of data, then instead of maybe processing all data all together, we can means process them in partitions.
no, it
Maybe.
doesn't matter it's a small data or huge data. You have to suppose solve a problem, you have to solve it. But why I'll be trying to see the content of each partition? Without knowing the contents also, you saw the word count example. We never saw the content of each partition. We just read that as a huge distributed list called RDD, and then we keep on applying the transformations. So where you feel like we need to know like the records of each partition? Do you see any practical use case? Can you relate it?
Perform validation.
What type of validation? That's true, but what type of validation?
Like type of data.
Exactly, type of data. So basically, some people who are from ETL background, or it's not just related to ETL, but you can it's a mathematical term like data skewness. Data skewness is something like you see some partitions will be having huge number of records, and some partitions will be having very less number of records. So there are many practical use cases. For example, you are working for a company called Razorpay. Okay, Razorpay is a fintech, financial technologies company. So they mostly work in the payment gateway. You go to Amazon.com, you purchase some product, and you go to the checkout page and you make the payment. That payment always goes through a payment gateway company. Okay, payment gateway basically is the company that is basically process your financial transaction. They will take the amount from the buyer, and they will validate the account informations and all, and they will transfer the amount to the seller. Okay, it's a finance related transactions. So different companies, it's for them it's very difficult to create their own gateway because it's a huge development, huge thing. So for that, most of the companies they outsource. They will generally take the payment gateway from Razorpay and InstaMojo, and there are different CC Avenue. There are different payment gateways are there. So basically they will take a cut like 2% minimum. They will take from your maximum 2%. So they will take 2% of the revenue from means amount from the transactions. Okay, so you'll get a sense like these are all like every time you purchase some product, if your product has been quoted as 1,000 rupees, you are paying 1,000 rupees. Thus, the seller is not getting the entire 1,000 rupees. So the payment gateway they themselves just make a cut of 2 rupees. Okay, so now 98 rupees is available for the seller. Again, Amazon will take a cut because because the seller is using Amazon's platform to sell their product. So again, say Amazon will take another 2%, 3% cut. So that means if it is 1,000 rupees product, so roughly 4 to 5% is you have to pay to the platforms. Okay, so you have to maybe like Amazon will take overall cut, like including everything, their platform fees, their gateway fees, their advertisement fees, all these things they will they will deduct it and they will give you the rest of the amount. Okay, like that. So basically that's basically a quick analogy of that. So I'm saying like I'm just coming to Razorpay. Razorpay has multiple merchant integration. Okay, you are running a small business, you also want to take digital payments, so you just you basically opted for their service. Now you become a merchant of Razorpay. Okay, you every time you want to collect the fund, you can just share the payment gateway link and the person can make the payment, so they will get a 2% cut and you will get the rest of the amount. Okay, similarly there are different merchants. Airtel is basically collecting the amounts digitally. Every time you go for a prepaid postpaid recharge, you have to go through their official website and make the payment. There also the payment gateway comes into picture. Similarly, Flipkart is also e-commerce company. They are not fintech company, but they are selling tens of thousands or lakhs of millions of products every day. So they also use this payment gateway to collect the amount, right? So when Razorpay is doing some analysis, they want to find out, like say month on month or quarter on quarter, which revenue is giving them how much of the revenue. Okay, so you want to do some aggregation. So when you're doing aggregations in merchant wise sum of transactions or average transaction, okay, so what it will do, like, so for one merchant you have 10 records, you're finding out the average. For another merchant's 1000 transactions, you're getting 1000, you're getting the average. For another merchant, you have billion transactions or a million transactions. Example, Flipkart.com, at daily level they are selling a million product. If you take the monthly or quarterly level, there are billions of records. So when you are calculating say average or any metrics or any KPI from this kind of data, so sometimes your code fail. Okay, because you can see in the backend, these are all different partitions getting executed by JVMs. So one partition, so almost 99% of partitions are having decent size of data, but less than 1% of the merchants are having huge amount of data. Okay, those partitions will be having huge amount of data, so you'll not be able to process it. So these are the different scenarios where you may think of, like, let's see, like, what are the distributions of the data in different partitions. You just divided the data basis the merchant ID. So you end up creating 10,000 partitions, out of which you see 99% of the merchants are having average number of records, whereas less than 1% of the merchants like Flipkart, Amazon.in, Airtel, Jio, those kind of companies are having huge number of transactions. So that's called data skewness. Data is skewed towards some merchants. Okay, in that case, we may interested to see, like, what are the records. Okay, how many count of records in each partition. That also we should think of, like, using, isn't it? So that's a practical usage, like, where it's not practical. It's a, like, if you are getting into a decent company like who have decent amount of data, so it's very common to see the data distribution. Okay, how the data has been distributed and all this. Okay, so that's one thing. And coming to this example, for this example, what you saw, like num rdd parts is equal to num rdd.glom function. So glom function is creating again another rdd of list of integers. Num rdd is a rdd of integers, but this rdd of integers will be converted to rdd of list of integers. Each list represents the each list represents the elements in a given partition. Okay, then you are calling collect function. Collect function is used to get all these records from that RDD, to convert that RDD to a list, basically. Okay, take function, collect function, these are used to basically convert the RDDs to list. Okay, take function is used to take a handful of records from the RDD, because the RDD is basically a billion of record. You won't be able to see that billion records in the console. And so that's why we call take 5, take 10, take 20, like that. So, but another function is called collect. Collect doesn't take the number of elements. It will just convert the entire RDD to a list. Okay, we always avoid using collect function, but since I know I have only 10 elements, so I call collect function to see. You can see it's creating 8 partitions, 8 collections. First collection having 1, second one having 2. Like, there are 10 elements, 8 partitions. That means 2 partitions are having more than 1 element. That's what you can say. 9, 10 is one partition, and 4, 5 is another partition. Okay, where you have 2 elements, but rest of the partitions are having 1 elements each. Okay, so that's so I just want to take a pause. I just don't want to rush you to the program. I thought, like, I'll be able to execute that customer wise count sum of transaction, but which is fine. We can just discuss that in the next session. So the assignment is basically just tweak this code to get the count of the records in each partition. Here I can see each partition's content. First partition is having element 1, second is having element 2, third is having 3, fourth one is having 4 and 5. So I just, instead of getting the elements as it is, I want the counts of each. Okay, just give it a shot. Okay, just try any Google search and just find it out. Anyway, like, we'll be discussing in the next session, but just give it a try. Okay, so that's all for today. So we have to wrap it up now, and we'll again connect Saturday, 8 a.m. IST. Okay, that is the same last sessions, last week's time. Saturday, Sunday, 8 to 10 morning IST, and Thursday, 7 to 9 IST.
Siddharth,
Yeah, Abhishek.
Here, like, could not understand how this output generated. Like, in like, what's the logic behind generating this output? Like, you have, I got that 8 partition are there as a by default.
Mhm.
So 8 partitions has been created. So now you ran two functions, number of this number RDD glom function,
Mhm.
uh, and these parts you go
The
to
get num partitions.
yeah.
Get num partitions gives the number of.
So here you have number of partitions, you got 8 as a result. Now you came down, you did the number RDD glom
Mhm.
function. So these two lines, how come this output will appear? Like, what's the logic behind?
It's basically creates a list of integer. That's how basically it works. So glom function simply returns an integer, and here get num partitions returns an integer. That will, you can see like it returns an integer there, and glom function is again another function that convert your RDD. So your num RDD is a RDD of integer. Glom function, when you called it, it just converted that to a RDD of list of integer. Okay, so glom function just converted that RDD of integer to RDD of list of integer. This part is clear or not?
No,
Means what's the confusion?
the confusion, like, actual output I'm not able to correlate. Like, okay, function is
Forget
there.
about the actual
Uh,
output. So here we are applying a transformation on our RDD called num RDD.
hmm.
Okay, so num RDD is a RDD of integers, and we saw glom function is available in the RDD class. Okay, what it says, it says returns a RDD created by coalescing all elements within each partition into a list. So you saw you have 8 partitions. So it created it. So glom function will create 8 lists. Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so this num RDD is a RDD of integers. What we have created here, it's a RDD of integers. And
okay,
now we are saying num RDD dot glom. So you get RDD of list of int. Okay,
okay,
RDD of, you can say, list of integer.
okay,
It's basically one transformation. You can think of like whatever the customer ID by sum of transactions, those kind of transformations we were like discussing. You can now think like this is a very technical use case. So num RD is a RDD of integers, and I called glom function. Glom function just transformed that RDD of integer to a RDD of list of integer. What
okay,
each list represents? Each list represents the number of elements available in each partition. I have 8 partitions. I saw the contents are like first partition having a single element 1, second partition is having a single element 2, fourth partition is having 2 elements 4 and 5, like that. It
so
just converted.
got your point. Here the question here, like, how come this particular function got that at like 8 partition, first will have 1, second will have 2, it could be changed as 1 comma 2 in the first partition,
Exactly, it's
second.
completely random.
Yeah, that is that place
So,
I want to come. Like, how
okay,
come
okay,
this?
okay, got it.
Yeah,
So here it's not exactly same as a list. List is basically every time you insert a element, delete a element, it's all index basis. Okay, list elements are accessed through index. But RDD, though we are calling it a list, but you cannot access the elements through uh, index, because you think logically. Your data is not anymore limited to the RAM of a single computer. The data itself, first of all, in the disk itself, it is partitioned. When you uploaded the data to the SDFS, the data is distributed across multiple computers with different size, with different partitions. So each partition can be having any number of records. If you don't use any specific partitioning logic, so by default it uses hash partitioning. Okay, so it will
okay,
basically calculate the hash of each of these entries or each of these data points, and basis that it decide which partition it will throw that data out. Okay, so it will basically see like I have billion record, and the data has to be stored as 8 partitions. It will basically convert all these billion records into 8 hash buckets. Okay, and basis that it will tag the elements, which element will go into which partition. Okay, that's the part. But again, like later we'll see, like you yourself control the partitioning. I don't want to go always with the hash partitioning. I just want to apply some aggregations basis customer ID. So I will better feel like let's create the partitions in such a way each partition has the records of one customer ID. Each customer ID is having say 10 transactions, 1,000 transactions, or 5,000 transactions. So each partition is having transaction records corresponding to a single customer ID or single date on which you are applying the grouping. Getting my point? So you can also control the number of partitioning, and you can control the records inside each partition. Everything you can control. Here I am not doing anything. Here you saw I am reading the data without specifying the partition. It created 8 partition. Then I am calling glom function. I am seeing the content of all these 8 partitions. I saw the elements are also completely random. And it's never guaranteed. You are running like you are getting 4, 5 as the 4th partition. Somebody else who is running, he may get the first entry as the partition, that is 1 and 2, and second element is a single integer having 3. Fourth one is having say having single element say 5. Like any, it's completely hash based. Okay, so the elements are not in the sequence in which you have created. Okay, we'll see the later. We'll see like how you create your own custom partition, because Spark is all about partitioning. The better and the more clarity will be having on the partitioning front, you will be able to execute the job. Sometimes you will see you have huge cluster, like say cluster is having say 300 GB RAM, but you are working on a data set having less than 100 GB of data. You are still struggling. Your job is not running. It's failing, having some issue. So that means you have to basically work on the optimization part, how to tune the partitioning so that the job will be running. Okay, so all these things are there. It will come slowly, but for now, so I'm using the default things. Default partitioning is basically hash partitioning. So it randomly just distributed the data across multiple partitions. So I'm saying glom function just converted my RDD of integers to RDD of list of integers, and each list represents the elements inside a given partition. And how this partition created? By using some hashing technique. Okay, it calculated the hash of this thing, and it's divided those hashes into 4 buckets, and it's just adding the elements into different partition basis their hash values.
Okay, got you.
Hello.
Yeah.
So this num RDD parts, so that when you have done this function num RDD parts dot collect, that converts it into a list of integers. So you have this other variable num RDD. So that is RDD of int. So can you output that, or that is like an object? And
no, you can also create. So you want to see the content of this, that also.
Yeah, just can you output it num RDD?
You can just see this dot collect. It's printing the list of 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10. It's just converted that RDD of integers to a list of integer. Okay, so take function, collect function, their job is to basically convert your RDD to a list. Collect
okay, so you have done like without collect, can you just output it? Just num RDD? I mean, does it?
Only just num RDD? No, it will just show the object of that. So if you simply
object
num RDD, it will basically show in this way.
Okay.
So has representation of the object.
So so now num RDD has like element from 1 to 10. So that has like 3 copies of it, and it is distributed across different.
No, here there is a catch. So coming to the persistence layer and the job execution layer, these are different. So when you are bringing data to the SDFS file system or any of this distributed file system, it's not done only through Spark. You can use any tool to bring your data from different production environment to your SDFS, to your data lake. When you store the data, you persist the data in the file systems. There, this 128 MB block size concepts holds true, that will be coming. But the same data, when you read it as a collection, in the memory, there is no such concept of like 3 replications and all, because memory is precious. Hard disk is basically, you can take a 1 TB of hard disk with 2000 rupees INR. But like taking a 8 GB RAM of 16 GB of RAM of like say DDR2 or DDR3 RAM, if you just purchase 16 GB RAM will cost you like 6,000 rupees. Like you can see the cost is almost 100 times more. So RAM is basically, it always stores the data as one copy. Okay. Here we don't manage this fault tolerance and all this. In the disk level, it is 3 copies and all this partitioning thing holds true. And when you read the data and created an in-memory collection, so it's a different story altogether. So it's a valid question. All are good questions only, and we have a lot of discussions ahead. So it's a valid questions. Okay, well, both the questions you asked, they are actually valid questions. Okay. So we'll discuss that later. So I just have to wrap up because I have a call at 10 o'clock. I have to get ready for that office call. So just practice all these things. Okay, we'll connect again on Saturday and just come up with some good questions. Let's have a good interaction, good questionnaire session, so that like we can learn in a better way, isn't it? Okay, so so that's all for today. We'll connect on Saturday again. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Siddharth.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Share that document. I don't get that document you created in Notepad and blah blah.
Yeah, Notepad, that will basically Kishore will share in the WhatsApp chat. Okay, so whatever we written that in the text pad, so Kishore will share it on the.
In the last session also you did something in the Notepad.
Yeah, Monosis will share. Last session Monosis was sharing. He will be sharing. He was sharing the screen, so you'll be sharing.
Yeah, I'll be sharing it.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Then. Yeah. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Siddharth, hello.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Can you send me the last recording session? I just got only one. I didn't get the one on Sunday.
Oh no, I think I've shared both. You see, there are 2 links.
No. I just got only one.
Okay.
I'm not
I'll
getting
share it.
one.
I'll share it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.